All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of 2024 for QT2 Systems. Our topic today is the importance of nutritional recovery. Our presenter this evening is Ann Rollins, who is one of our registered dietitians with the Core Diet. Welcome, Ann.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for this opportunity. This is two of my favorite things, nutrition and recovery, all rolled up into one. So excited to be discussing this tonight. So thank you all for giving me your time this evening. Like I said, these are two of my favorite things rolled into one. A little bit about me. I got my master in science for clinical dietetics from New York University. And board certified in sports dietetics. I've been working with the Core Diet since 2008. I'm an ultra marathoner and an Ironman, and all the stuff that goes along with that. So over the years, I have put my passions together, nutrition and sports. I love what I do, and I'm really excited to present this topic. Recovery is one of my favorite things. Our head coach, Jesse, always says that recovery is the most important meal for an athlete. And I believe also that that is true, but I also believe that we can stretch the recovery to be outside of just that one meal. And I wanna introduce some concepts this evening of how we can put recovery into our entire year. So go ahead to the next slide and we'll get started here. Those of you who are not familiar with QT2 systems, we operate on 5 cornerstones. And, what do we need to be a successful athlete? Training, we need to train. We need restoration, which we're going to talk about, and day-to-day nutrition. We need to be able to fuel. We need to understand pacing, and we need mental fitness. So those are the 5 cornerstones that we always talk about in QT2 systems. And the cornerstone I will be delving into this evening is restoration and day-to-day nutrition. Next slide. All right. So what we're going to be talking about this evening is, why is rest and recovery important? What are the different aspects of recovery? There's more than you might think. And because I love recovery, maybe I've created some. We'll talk about those. So I think they're very helpful. And we want to talk about, how do we apply recovery from a global to an acute system, right? So we can apply it for the whole year, almost like you'll hear me reference the annual training plans, right? When we do our trainings for the year, right? We want to do our recovery for the year as well. And then how are we going to implement these simple strategies so you guys can walk out of here this evening with some executable action items that you can help recover yourselves as you go into the season, into your training. All right. So when I started to do this, I was like, this has to be mandatory, part of the plan. We can't go, oh, I think we just jumped ahead there, Reem. I think so. We can't have we can't not have this be mandatory. And athletes in general, I started out, years ago as a runner, and I would get injured and I would not, I wouldn't rest, I wouldn't stretch, I wouldn't do any of the things that you should do. And I learned the hard way that, hey, if you do these things, wow, you don't get injured. And so the more I'm in sport and the more that I work in athletics, I realize, like, this should really not be like, oh yeah, if I get to it, it should be a mandatory part of your plan. Very important. And there's different ways in which we can apply rest and recovery that I'm going to go through. So why is this so mandatory? Why am I so passionate about this? Is because a lack of recovery can absolutely become an injury. As I said, when I was younger and running, I was like, oh, IT band, I can't bend at the knee. Like, I don't know, right? So we can rest and recover, and we can decrease that incidence there. Dehydration is can become an injury. I consider it, if you've ever been actually dehydrated, it's an injury and you need time to recover from it. So it's not super fun the next time you go out on a training session if you've been dehydrated. So that is absolutely an injury. We can have a physical injury, like I mentioned, an IT bench. We can, have all types of things. And we can have overtraining syndrome. All of these that I've just mentioned, physical injury, dehydration, and overtraining syndrome, are all can be addressed with rest and recovery. Okay. This is a major challenge, I understand, for multi-sport athletes. We are accustomed to being on the go. We like things the way that we like them. We're very like regimented, and resting and taking time off or downtime can feel inherently wrong, especially when we're like, I'm training for an Ironman, or I'm doing an ultra, whatever. I've got all this training to do. I don't want to lose this day. Right. So it can feel inherently wrong in our minds to sit still. And maybe we'll talk about that in the mindset portion of this. And so we have this abundance of energy that needs to be managed. It needs to be dispersed. So those are some of the challenges that I see when I'm working with people, myself included, of why rest and recovery is, you can't have it as an afterthought. It really needs to be part of the plan. All right, so we'll talk about the nutrition impacts here of rest and recovery. So there's different ways that this happens, right? So we can have a physical impact, right? If we eat too little, maybe we lose muscle mass. We eat too much, we have adipose tissue. We eat the wrong things. We're deficient in certain things. It's going to impact our anatomy, our physical anatomy. Okay. Our nutrition also is going to impact our physiological self. Okay, we eat food, we drink, we have our sports drinks, our nutrition fuels. They're carbohydrate and electrolyte, and these interact with the body very quickly so that the body can carry out tasks. And sometimes when I'm trying to encourage people to eat vegetables, they're like, I don't like them. I'm like, look, at this stage, nobody's asked you what were your preferences. You're going to need to get in some vitamins and minerals, right? However we're going to do it, we need to do it. We need them in there, right? So our nutrition is going to impact how our body operates mentally. Okay, our nutrition is going to impact our mood, our intellect. If we don't eat well, then let's say we miss a meal, we're hungry, we get hangry, we're moody, there's all this kind of stuff. But even if we if we eat a lot of junk food and we're missing some nutrients, we're missing essential fatty acids, this can impact our cognition, can increase brain fog. So it really sort of impacts our mental. And then emotional. So all of those things that I just mentioned are going to contribute to behavioral choices, right? So if we missed meals, we don't feel well, now it's 4 in the afternoon, maybe we're grabbing caffeine and chocolate or sugar. We don't feel like we have energy to cook. And so we grab fast food on the way home. And then we're like, oh man, I wasn't supposed to do that. And it really impacts the way that we feel about ourselves, but actually our actual neurotransmitters, right? So there's a lot to our nutrition. It's not just this arbitrary thing that we're trying to do. We really want to eat to heal ourselves and be functional about that. Okay. All right. I mentioned global to acute. What does that mean? So when I want to look at your nutrition by blocks. Okay. So if you have done trained with us and you've seen your ATP, your annual training plan, your histogram, and how we lay things out over the year based on your races and based on your goals. I want you guys to think of your rest and recovery sort of as the same thing. So when we do the ATP, of course, your off season is built in there. Now, during the off season, I can't tell you how many times I have to repeat this. I'm going to repeat it again. During your off season, replenish yourself. Don't restrict, gain some weight, because during the season, especially as for multi-sport triathlon, where we're matching up macros, we're doing a lot of training, there's a lot of scheduling, there is a lot. And if you're an age grouper, you've got to go to work, or you've got to you've got other things going on in your life outside of just training for your Ironman or your half or whatever it is. So there's a lot of stressors to the body during the training season, right? Things that you have to think about with food, with training. Off season, just forget it all, okay? Definitely replete what we've been taxing for the whole season, okay? So as I mentioned, training blocks, we get the histogram. You want to understand your strength blocks, right? We understand, okay, we had the off season, there's no training, I'm not doing any stuff. And then we come out, we start to maybe just do some range of motion stuff, right? And then maybe we go into sports specific strength, and then we'll get into endurance building, and then we get into racing. Okay. So how do each of these impact your nutritional requirements and recovery? So as we start out, we're not going to need tons of sports fuels, right? As we're just doing our range of motion and strength training in the gym, or just some shake it out runs and things like that. We're not going to need as much fuel, as many calories. Our recovery is going to be important, but it might look a little bit more, it might not look so intense in the beginning. So we want to match that to the beginning of the season. Now I want to kind of look at a little bit. Oh, sorry, I'm still on that slide. I said I don't have a lot to say on each slide. That's that was wrong. So our active rest days. Active rest days, you want to make sure that you get ample calories in, high phytonutrients, anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, all the big words, all the good stuff. The reason why I say that is because when you are training and then you get a day off, you're not going to do any training. Your body isn't really like, oh yeah, we're not training today, so we didn't need those extra calories. It's still like, okay, at some point in time, we're probably going to have to do some ridiculous ride. So we're hungry, right? And your mechanism is driving. So you really want to focus on, making sure you don't overconsume calories on your active rest days, and focus on, vegetables and fruits kind of in that order. They're going to give you a lot of fiber. They're going to give you the phytonutrients that you need to recover from the harder days that you've had, the hard days that you have coming, right? So that should be the focus on active rest days, okay? Now, within the individual day of rest and recovery, okay, there's something that we call the post-workout window. And, I want to try to think of rest and recovery on the individual days, the same way that we nuance our training, right? There's going to be speed days, intervals, threshold days, strength training. So I want to think of the recovery the same way. How do I recover from what have I just done? Do I need a recovery drink? Do I need a protein shake? So we want to think about, what have I done? How do I recover from that? Okay, alrighty, next slide. Okay, so the first one I mentioned was physical, right? Nutrition impacts us physically. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to work on this recovery process for the physical body? Okay, so often rest, again, we're going to be relative to, like an ATP or annual training, which is going to may require adjusted calories. What are we doing during during that off? We're down regulating. So what do we need to do to make sure that we don't gain too much weight, or we don't, totally go overboard and lose too much weight? Okay. So, oh, go back. Yeah. So heat and cold are two of my favorite temperatures. So heat, when you use heat on your body, is going to increase blood flow to the areas. So getting into a hot tub, heating pad, sauna, steam, red light therapy, all of this is going to draw blood into the area. So two things to, kind of think about here. When we're doing physical recovery to the body, we're bringing heat on. And we'll just go through this piece quickly because there's not too much nutrition, but we can't do recovery without this stuff. Heat brings in blood flow to an area, and it's going to swell it up a little bit. So we might feel a little bit discomfort. So sometimes if people are super sensitive to pain, I would say, like, maybe back off your heat and stick with your cold a little bit more so. But I like to go heat, draw blood in. It's going to help me recover quickly because blood is the taxi cab of all the nutrients to the place. So we want to get that blood flow going with that heat. Cold, we're going to have a decreased blood flow, kind of the opposite. It's going to decrease the inflammation because it's going to stop that blood flow from getting in there. Ice bath, polar plunges, cryo tanks, all of those are great. Myofascial release from foam rollers, balls, Graston, massage therapy, gua sha, acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractic, compression. All of those are going to help with the physical daily recovery, okay, in an acute phase. Okay, next slide, Reem. Thank you. Okay, there we go. All right. So physiological, how do we recover an acute physiological stage? Nutrition is key here. Okay. How much and of what macro are part of the equation, but it's not all of the equation. Okay. We want to make sure that we're including plants, fruits and veggies and sea veggies, cold water fish, omega-3s, anti-inflammatory properties in the omega-3s. And just kind of here, as I talk a lot about omega-3s, you know, they're not magical, but our diet typically is made up of a lot of omega-6s. And those are the inflammatory properties. And we need both omega-6 and omega-3s. And so if we have too much 6 and we're doing a lot of stuff that causes inflammation, that inflammation switch stays on. And we want to eat or supplement omega-3s so that we have enough of the compounds available to us to turn on our anti-inflammatory switches. Okay. So we can either take in the omega-3s, or we can omit the highly inflammatory foods of the omega-6s. Okay. Under injury, I usually will tell people, just, you know what, right now, while you're injured, back off your beef, back off your corn and corn products. They're high in omega-6s, they're inflammatory. Doesn't mean that those are bad foods. It just means that if you injured yourself, I would just back off of those for the first week or so while you're recovering. They're excellent for other things, but they might not be helpful when you're inflamed. Okay. Vitamin C and vitamin E are the most predominantly used antioxidants in the body. So you hear all this talk about vitamin C and emergency and all of this stuff. We create a very oxidative state in the body with energy production. And so we burn it all up. Ever notice if you've been training lots, you're kind of on the cusp of like really pushing, you might start to feel like you're getting, some respiratory stuff. Your immune system is starting to feel a little rugged. It is because your immune system and your energy production take from the same pool of vitamin C, and energy production beats up on immunity every time because your immune system doesn't need to go to battle right away, right? But you need to produce energy right away. So energy steals the vitamin C. So it's important to get your vitamin C repleted, especially when we're doing a lot of training and high training volumes, okay? Pre and probiotics would be excellent for your physiological recovery, and an anti-inflammatory diet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things as we move through this. Okay. All right. Ready for the next one. Okay. Okay, good. I have more on physiological stuff. So herbs and spices, some of my favorite things that are the most helpful for inflammation are herbs and spices. My favorite thing that I like to do is turmeric and cinnamon tea. So I take turmeric and cinnamon and a little bit of black pepper with just some hot water. And I love this tea. It feels like it's just like a warm hug and a blanket for me. But it's got some anti-inflammatory properties. Horseradish, also excellent. So horseradish, we were just talking about, I was talking about horseradish before. There is nothing that horseradish is not good for. It is antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antioxidative. It just helps with any autoimmune disorders. There's research on it. It's fantastic. Cumin, cinnamon has a very insulin-like effect in the body. So a lot of these herbs and spices that we use, surprise, come from plants, and they are actually have health properties for us. So don't be afraid to branch out and use some of these teas and herbs and spices for their recovery. Recovery drink, I have a whole slide about like how we're going to manage actual recovery for post-workout as far as your sports nutrition goes. So I'll talk about that. But recovery, a good recovery drink for aerobic endurance athletics, this is a 4-to-1 carb protein ratio. I think somewhere in this presentation, I don't know if I don't have it here, I'm going to say it. I get like, no, and this is what I eat as a recovery. I go, it was one of my favorites is, no, I go get a McFlurry from McDonald's afterward. It's my favorite thing. It's awesome. I'm like, that's great. Don't do that anymore because, while it's great, it's a nice treat, it really is super inflammatory. It's not helping you recover from what you've just done. And that's what we really want. When we can recover better and faster, we're going to show up back to training, a more rested athlete. Consider yourself like, what if you had like 2 extra days of rest, right? Like, won't you think about like, oh, wait, I'm recovered faster, right? It's like you made a 24-hour day, a 28-hour day. So think of it that way. Tart cherry decreases time to fatigue, speeds recovering time in running. The research on tart cherry is fantastic. A lot of times when we look at research, it comes up with sort of like in the same genre of, oh, we found something improves cholesterol and then some blood pressure and, other generalized cardiac issues. Tart cherry research showed decreased time to fatigue in runners across the board in the 6 studies that I looked at. That's like, it doesn't usually happen. So I really like the tart cherry. So the SAMe is a huge antioxidant and chelator of toxins. Glutathione is an antioxidant. It also is used for increased fat metabolism and liver health. And these are some of the supplements too, which I put them in here. Literally, I could do, we could do a whole webinar on these themselves, and I do appreciate that because I am moving through them quickly. NAD plus is another very powerful antioxidant with looks at your cellular function, which is important. Glutamine, one of my faves. I have to say, I do have favorite nutrients. I know. Kind of a geeky thing, but I like to have my faves. Glutamine is one of my favorites. It's a non-essential amino acid, which means that, we'll eat proteins, we'll break it down into our proteins into amino acids, we'll get glutamine. When we're doing high volume training, we typically can't eat enough to recover in time to get back out for our training sessions. And then our glutamine becomes a limiter in energy production. So you see, if we supplement this glutamine, it's an anti-fatigue situation going on there. And that's because it can become a limiter with high volume training. Branched chain amino acids are another, I don't know, maybe top 10. They're great for muscle recovery. They're also great to kind of settle your stomach during long rides. If you don't like to eat solids, they can be beneficial there. There's a whole bunch of topicals as well. So we talk about like BioFreeze, magnesium. Some of the cannabis CBD products are great for the physiological recovery. Okay. This is the grid that I said I was going to talk to you specifically about recovery from your training sessions. This in the core diet, this is kind of like, look, this is what we got to look at for the day. This is how we break it down. So if you guys want to take a screenshot of this so that you have it, please do. We break our day up into windows. Our pre-workout, we have like our in training, which is completely separate because nobody knows what your training is, your recovery, and your post-workout, and then the rest of the day. Okay. When we talk about our pre-workout, we're talking about the hour before your workout starts. This is where we want to get your blood sugar up. We want to get you ready to perform, right? So we don't want you to be sluggish. I also don't want you to have a giant meal sitting in your gut. So we want to make sure we're eating foods that are easy to digest, like fig Newtons, gels, breads, things like that aren't going to stick around. Okay. Recovery. Okay. This is like, when I go through teaches with athletes, recovery is like, we're talking about recovery so much. This here talks about a recovery drink you should have within the half an hour following your workout. Okay. Again, I mentioned the research shows us we really want to do like a 4-to-1 ratio carb to protein, right? Sometimes we hear chocolate milk get talked about, right? And that is typically because it is a 4-to-1 ratio. So it's the same carb to protein. Some of the engineered products like Clean or Endurox are, I like those better somewhat because not only are they a 4-to-1 ratio, but they also have a more optimal amino acid profile, and they've got some electrolytes in there, and the chocolate milk doesn't have those. So while they are engineered products, they are a little bit more optimal. Chocolate milk is a great second runner up for recovery. Okay. There's a bit, one of my favorite, as an aside, one of my favorite comedians does this whole thing about chocolate milk, and his wife's yelling at him because he brings home chocolate milk, and he's like, it's supposed to be good for after you work out. So I'm like laughing at this whole bit. And then he's like, in fairness, she's angry because I don't work out. So anyway, so no drinking the chocolate milk if you're not working out. Your post-workout window is something that can be very confusing. I get a lot of questions, so I just want to go slow and walk through your post-workout window. Okay, so we've taken in food prior, we've done our training, done with the training, took in your recovery drink. Now you will also take in a post-workout meal to get some nutrient density and replete some of the things that you've used. You want to do that within the hour of finishing your training. Okay. You always want to have a post-workout meal within the hour of finishing your training. You always want to refuel. Okay. Don't stress your body, especially if you're trying to drop weight, lose weight. You're like, oh, I don't want to take in all those calories. These calories they have a purpose. They're not arbitrary. They're very well thought out, and they serve you as an athlete. So don't cut yourself short on these. Cut yourself short on the McFlurries. Okay. This is what you want to make sure you get in. So you will always have a post-workout window. Whether or not you add in higher glycemic index foods is up to what you are trying to do with your body composition. Okay. Your post-workout window is equal to your workout. If you had a 2-hour ride, you got 2 hours after you finish the ride where your body is hypermetabolic, and it takes about that amount of time as you rode to recover from that training. You can incorporate a few more calories in that window. Should you choose not to incorporate a few more calories in that, we can utilize that to lose some weight, to recognize some weight loss there. But you don't want to do it by dropping off your recovery drink or not eating the meal. Okay, so those two things are super important. I just want to be really clear about those. Okay, during the rest of the day, your guys are eating all of your amazing, your nutrient dense stuff that's good for your recovery. Okay, post-workout drink. I think I've talked a lot about that. Okay, 0 to 15 minutes. I always try to say 30 minutes is absolute max. Recovery meal, 40 to 50 minutes post-workout. Does it contain the carbs? Try to understand what it is that you're after. And then, do you always eat this meal? Yes. Yes, you always eat this meal. Okay. All right. So recovery drinks, we talked about 4-to-1. The clean drink is 10 grams of protein, 41 grams of carbs. It's NSF certified, which means you won't flag for if you need to be tested. If you're a racing pro and they test you. But what it means if you're not pro is that there's probably not going to be a whole bunch of junk in that product. And that's why I really like clean. They do what you need to do for endurance athletics, but they also don't use a bunch of garbage. So if you go and you get other products and you get the flavors of like, double chocolate peanut butter espresso, you're probably going to have a lot of junk in that. Okay. So you want to try to just avoid that. Chocolate milk I talked about. And a recovery drink is important because liquids are easily absorbed. Sometimes I hear about like the McFlurry, but also I hear like, oh, no, I have like a peanut butter sandwich or a meatball hero. I feel great. You'd feel more great if you drank liquid, and your muscles would feel more great. So do the liquid. It is very easily absorbed, gets where it's going. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we recover mentally, as I talked about all the different areas of physical, physiological, mental, and emotional. So now we're on to mental. Okay. When we're training, when we're racing, when we're doing anything that requires us to do well, in my opinion, okay, I like to use visualization. I learned visualization techniques, 2 different areas in my life, and I use them frequently, and I think they do really well. I first used them in acting. My undergrad degree was not in science; it was in performing arts, and we did a lot of visualization, and I enjoy that. And then when in the '90s, I was doing a lot of running with the New York Roadrunners Foundation. When we were getting ready to do my first marathon, the guys got up there and they walked us through the visualization of the course, and that really helped me to understand how to apply that visualization of just like, ooh, everything's great, to how do I make that visualization work for me? And that was really great. So we want to think about visualization as recovery. Your mind is very powerful. And I'm sure if you've ever been out there on a course and you feel like you're dogging it, and then you start to think about like things that are not going well, it becomes more challenging. But if you all of a sudden visualize yourself like winning the Boston Marathon, all of a sudden your pace picks up. So what you were thinking, your mindset is very, very important, right? So you want to try some visualizations, mindset exercises to help you with behavioral modifications. You can use some motivation videos. I really like audiobooks on recovery, healing, illness, and injury, and I like to use them kind of on an off week or a low volume week where my athlete or myself might be looking for things to do because, maybe I had, 18 hours of training and now it's 12. And I'm like, I'm gonna, I'm like, I'm gonna just go for a run up this mountain because I'm bored. Those are the weeks where I like to give that as the assignment. Okay. So we also want to know, like, to what are we exposing the brain? And this is, I do a lot of work with neural tags in the brain, as to, as a dietitian, we have to understand behavioral modifications and how do we create habits, how do we uncouple habits. And so a lot of neurology that we now have been looking at over the past 10 or so years is really interesting. And we really want to understand, like, what are we exposing our brain to? Because that exposure, I always think of the brain as a giant soundboard, right? So go back to my performing arts. We go into the recording studio and there's a giant soundboard with all those different knobs that you can slide up, like 100 knobs on the board, and you can slide them up and down. And each one of them can go in a different position. And think of that as like, that's how your brain is. So there's like a million different combinations, yes, but there's only that many, right? It's still on the board. Okay. So when we expose the brain to positive things about recovery, injury, when we think about like injury, I've read research about people walking them through surgical procedures that has actually improved their recovery time when they didn't get the surgical procedure, but they've taught themselves the surgical procedure, or they've taught themselves how to visualize the body healing. It's sped up recovery time. So it's really interesting how the brain works, and what we expose it to is really important. So I know I'm talking 1,000 miles a minute right now. So let's all do 5 senses visualization here, just so that you guys can all practice. We're about midway, right? Yeah, good. Okay. So if it is safe for you to do so, if you're driving your car, doing something else, right, don't blink your eyes closed. But if you're sitting listening to this, blink your eyes closed. And we're just going to take a beat as we transition into closing your eyes. Okay. And look into the back of your eyelids. Okay, we see that black canvas on the back of your eyelids. We're just going to take a nice inhale. As we just bring it down, I would ask for you all to think of a happy place. Where's a place anywhere in the world that would make you absolutely happy? Doesn't need to be anything super fancy or over the top. It could be at your own kitchen table. It could be very accessible, or it could be very far away. So let's start to bring up the visualization of that. And with your eyes still closed, kind of scan on that inside of that black canvas. Bring your visualization to life. Paint it right up on that black canvas. And from the left side of your mind's eye, take a nice panoramic sweep. Come through the middle, looking where you are, noticing the details. Come all the way over to the right. On your next inhale, do so through your nose. and see, what do you smell in this environment? Maybe there's tea, cookies baking, ocean, flowers. Open your ears, and what can you hear? Maybe there's wind rustling through the trees, waves are crashing, maybe. Maybe there's voices. Go ahead and reach out into this environment. Touch anything that is there with you. Could even be your own arm. Maybe it's your toes in the sand. What can you feel in this environment? And lastly, is there anything for you to taste in this environment? Maybe it's just sea salt on your lips. Maybe that warm cup of tea. Start now on the right side of your mind's eye and see all there is to see. Listening, tasting, smelling, feeling. As you sweep back through the center and over to the right side of your mind's eye, take in all of the action here in this beautiful visualization that you've created. Before we come back, go ahead and take a snapshot and file that snapshot away like a little Polaroid film somewhere in your brain. And at another time, when you're feeling like you need a nice relaxation moment, go ahead and pull that photo right back out. All right, so we'll go ahead and blink your eyes open. Good. So it was 3 minutes there. And I went a little bit slower because potentially it's the first time that I've done a visualization exercise with most of you. And I want to make sure that we get that experience. I like to recommend that people spend 20 seconds on each sense. Okay. So you can do this exercise in under a minute. I don't know if you noticed, but I was really hopped up in my speech before I did this exercise, and now I'm way chill. So potentially you are too. You've also given your brain recovery. You've given your brain break, happiness. We had happy neurotransmitters. So your soundboard that sets up happy just got set up in there, and it gave your brain a nice break with some recovery. So we'll slide right into emotional and how nutrition can impact the emotional and what we can do for that as far as recovery. So if we find that we're our person that might have too much energy, we may want to focus on calming foods. Some calming foods are high in magnesium. This is something that is very calming. You might see Calm Tea is now a big product out there. So you could have some magnesium tea. You could take a magnesium supplement. Or in general, you might just want to incorporate foods that are high in magnesium into your day. So leafy greens, cashews, oysters, and magnesium teas would be great. Let's say you have too little energy and you're like, oh, you're kind of dragging. You might want to go on the other side of this spectrum and incorporate some foods that will give you some energy, some invigorating foods. Live cultures, pre and probiotics, kefirs, yogurts, omega-3s are excellent. And peppers are also peppers are fantastic for this. I did kind of like this. Let's see. I did put it right there. Yeah, there it is. Yogurt, kefir, apple cider vinegar, sea veggies. But in the cayenne, I do a metabolic water which has cayenne, lemon, and ginger in it, which is that'll wake you up. Okay, so we can use some of those if you're feeling a little under. Overtraining and suboptimal recovery can increase fatigue or your perceived fatigue, right? You don't actually even need to be as tired as you are. If you've ever, maybe underfueled yourself during a marathon, we used to call it like bonking at mile 20. Never bonk. There's no reason for this anymore. It is an injury, right? It is an injury. And what happens there is your perceived fatigue is overwhelming, right? It's just you'll feel like, oh my gosh, you ran a mile. It took me, 25 minutes. And then you'll start to see yourself grabbing caffeine and sugar at 4 p.m. Okay. That is going to lead also not only for poor recovery, but now, the sugar and the caffeine late in the day can interrupt your sleep. Interrupted sleep will then not allow your cortisol levels to reset. So we're walking around now with increased cortisol levels, and that can have some unmanaged stress that will disrupt our physiology. We disrupt that physiology with the unmanaged stress. We have a mental disruption through the whole day. I'm sure everybody can understand when you're stressed, it's not your best day. Okay. So then your stress is going to now become a physical disruption as we see stress hormones not recovered in the body. Your digestion is off. You're tired. The foods that you're grabbing, it all kind of comes in together, and it will further disrupt your sleep. And now, when you do get to sleep with those cortisol levels as high as you can, when you come through a sleep cycle, you drop all the way down into REM sleep. You don't get as deep into REM as you want, and you do come up really high with those with the cortisol levels. Potentially, you wake up. So I have people think like, are you waking up or almost waking up every 90 minutes? It's a good sign that your cortisol levels are a little bit too high, and we have to do some emotional recovery. All right. Emotional recovery is also huge for a lot of us for postseason and, race, like situational depression. What can we do about that, right? We have a complete change in exercise, physiology, energy expenditure, metabolism, increased spare time, unmanaged energy, never good for us, right? So as far as nutrition goes, as I said at the top, replenish, do not restrict, gain some weight. That is hard to manage if you got all the first two bullet points going on, okay? Gaining weight with high nutrient dense foods, not the McFlurries, okay? It's a big difference, because if you're gaining weight from the highly processed foods, they can magnify the situational depression because they're junk foods. They're inflammatory. They're going to set off a whole bunch of processes in our body that are not healthy, that we're not recovering from. So we really want to gain that weight with, go ahead. I know. Say it. Veggies, fruits, lean proteins. I know. Everybody was like, and in the veggies. It's true. This is where our stuff comes from. Okay. So our takeaways here, okay, just to kind of pull this all together, kind of went through a whole bunch of different stuff. As I said, we went through, physiological, mental, emotional recovery, how the food really kind of intertwines in through all of those. How do we apply this over the course of our season, right? So we want to apply it from global to acute. Look at your whole season. When am I eating more calories? When am I eating a little bit less calories? When am I eating better calories? Okay. Include strategies and tools that complement the phase that you're in. Okay. Think about, physical, physiological, mental, and emotional components of your recovery. Okay. Expert discipline includes knowing when to be diligent and when to just take a break from your routines. Okay. This is something that is super hard for a lot of us. We feel like we're failing, we've given up. Most of what we do is to push past where most people would be like, this is insane. I'm out. Right. And as endurance athletes, we push past those points. But we really need to understand that at some point you got to back off, or you're going to drive yourself into the ground. So we don't want to do that. Before I go from here onto our last slide. The other takeaways that I mentioned before here that I said I was going to go through is the anti-inflammatory diet. A lot of people ask questions about it. I talked about the omega-3s. I talked about veggies. I talked about sea veggies. I talked about magnesium. These are all things that you want to incorporate into your day. When people go all in for the anti-inflammatory diet, another one of my favorite quotes that I made up is, don't put sprinkles on a cake you did not bake. Meaning, when Tom Brady, whatever, 15, oh, I know I'm like out of my locals, but like Tom Brady, but still, give it a few years. I know people won't grumble as much. But he was doing this anti-inflammatory diet, and I had to field a million questions about like, oh my God, Tom Brady's not eating tomatoes. Should I not eat tomatoes? Don't go through Burger King drive-through and be like, yeah, I want a Whopper, no tomatoes. That's what I mean about don't put sprinkles on a cake that doesn't exist. So an anti-inflammatory diet could be great. If you have 100% of all your other nutritional your nutritional foundations built in, you're eating the macros that you need to be eating for the phase of training that you're in. You're eating your vegetables, you're eating your omega-3s, you're incorporating your herbs and your spices and teas. You're understanding I'm high energy. Okay, I might want to take it down with, some oysters for dinner, right? Get some magnesium foods in there. If you're doing all of those things and you still have, you still feel like you want to go the next level to an anti-inflammatory diet, then sure. I might also hazard a guess that if you're doing all of those things, your need for an anti-inflammatory diet is almost eliminated. Okay. Very few situations, mostly medical conditions, might then warrant an anti-inflammatory diet, because the foundations that you're doing are they're so healthy. They're so healthy. You don't need that extra. So I wanted to just throw that in through this recording. You guys go back and re-listen to some of the foods that we talked about. Just remember, if you've got those foundations in, you don't need to do extra. Okay, you're doing what you need to do. The excellence comes from the consistency over and over and over again. Okay, so your discount here, this is your discount code because we appreciate you. So you guys get 15% off your race fueling plans. So if you're here live tonight, here's your discount code. And then if you're watching the recording at any time at all, then you also get a discount code on fueling plans. And I will say, if you were doing an Ironman, you probably want to get a race fueling plan. I always plug that for sure. It's something that you can control. So there's my information. Also, if you have questions, of course, I'll take them now, but my email is here. I always like to make that available for people who have come to a webinar. Just in case you have a question that potentially you don't feel comfortable asking in public, you can just send it to me here. Okay. So thanks for listening. And if anybody's got any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Yeah, and we actually have a few in the chat box. So if people want to, we'll go through the ones in the chat box now. If you have questions, feel free to type them in, or you're also welcome to come off mute once we go through these. So the first question was if you have any specific recommendations for audiobooks on healing.
Just in general, like general healing or something specific? And my answer is going to be yes, either way. And I'm pulling up my Audible list.
Yeah, Fran, why don't you come off and ask some more details?
Hi. Yeah, you had mentioned in a slide about listening to books on audio.
Yep.
And I think you had mentioned maybe relaxation, healing. And I mean, I always seem to have some sort of injury. So I was just wondering if you had any tricks up your sleeve, any specific, I don't know, podcasts, books.
I do. I'm scrolling. There's one. The name of it is going to, and it was given. There it is. The Biology of Belief, by Dr. Bruce Lipton is excellent. I think it's a good overview of how our bodies work, and it gives a nice blend of science and not science, right? So I like Biology of Belief. And another one that I really like is Buddha's Brain. And I think that does that's a great book that connects yoga and neuroscience, right? So it kind of breaks down like, the practice of yoga is not doing these arbitrary things. This is why this pose is here. This is good for your thyroid. This is good for your liver. Here's why, and all the things. So, so those two books are really great. As far as like listening to podcasts, I love Jaidev Singh. It's Jaidev Singh. And he does a bunch of free stuff. He specializes in Kundalini yoga. And his voice, if I ever struggle going to sleep, I could just put on his voice. It's like a warm blanket. I'm like, oh, okay, good night. So if you sign up for his stuff, he's got some free stuff on there. They do like a free meditation. You can join it, see if you like it, and then you can sign up for stuff where you can just keep doing his free stuff. So I like those.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question was if you have any recovery drinks that you recommend that don't have whey protein.
Let's see. I think when I've done this in the past, we have made our own. I don't know of any specifically. I can look them up. Can you just write that? Can you just drop your email and I can look some up for you? I think the only time we've ever done that is we made our own vegan the Vega line, right? So Vega probably, I would just want to double check it. So just check Vega and just make sure I have your email. So if I come across a few more, I will, I think it's a pea protein, their recovery product. Okay.
Next question was, do you encourage all the athletes that you work with to lose down to a race weight?
Yes and no. It really depends on what the athlete wants. You know, and what the usually when I work with an athlete, if they're working with a coach, we're a team. So the athlete gets to say, the coach gets to say, and I get to say. So if I'm working with an athlete that says, "And I want to win and I want to get on the podium," and they're not at a race weight that we're recommending, then yes, we would probably recommend that. That said, and this is big, you don't want to walk around at your race weight ever. You want to walk around at race weight like 10 days before race, and then you want to get out of there. It's a weight that is light. It's not meant to be trained at because you'll injure yourself. So, so then let's take another example. Maybe an athlete's like, listen, this is my first race. We're not going to, I don't think that race weight is going to be, that maybe, but it might not be. So it really is dependent on the goals of the athlete.
Okay, next one is, what is the minimum workout time frame that you follow up with recovery drink food? So like if you have a short
Right.
work, like what's the minimum length?
Yeah, that's a good question. So kind of with recovery, we usually go through and give our athletes like a grid to say, like, if you have done, like 1 hour, in swim, bike, and run, here's the recovery protocol. But on some of the like just shake it out runs, I would say no recovery product. And here's where I'll just make it a little bit broad. So if I was going to say like no recovery product, maybe it's a 20-minute run. Okay. Anything over 30 minutes, we got to do something. And we have 3 opportunities for our training. We have pre-workout, in training, and our recovery. Okay. If you're at the beginning of your season and we're just kind of doing like warm ups, still like getting your legs moving and that kind of thing, and it's a 30-minute run, I would have something before, and maybe you didn't have anything during, and then maybe you have some, a box of raisins as recovery. Okay. And again, depends on the athlete. Okay. Everybody's at a different place. So 30 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes is kind of like my window. I might drop out one of those areas. Okay. The more intense a workout starts to become, the more I want to make sure I'm getting recovered for it. So there's a little bit of an art form to it. If you just think like, okay, if I'm taxing my body, I've got 3 opportunities to fuel it. If I'm going all out, I'm using all 3 of those. And most of the time you were always using all 3 when you were in, recovering, injured, or, just getting going, you could come off some of those things a little bit. So probably didn't answer your question directly, but I would say probably like 25, 30 minutes, somewhere in that ballpark. Anything less than that, you could probably skip your recovery.
All right, the next one is a comment rather than a question from one of our other RDs, from Tammy. She said that she thinks that Tailwind makes a plant-based recovery drink.
Okay, Cool.
It's another option. I know I used one years ago, but I can't remember which one. I think it was Vega though.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was Vega. Because it's pea protein, right? So I think it was. I think that's true.
Right, those are the only questions we have in the chat box right now. If anyone else has any, please feel free to type them in, or you're absolutely welcome to just come off mute and ask them directly if you'd like. All right, we have another one. Is there a point where it would be a good idea to get an updated race fueling plan, like after a specific amount of weight gain over the years?
So if your body composition has changed dramatically, then yes, then so it's not so much based on time as it would be about like your body composition changing dramatically. So if you were, 250 pounds and went to 160, I would say we probably need to do a new race fueling plan. But if you're, 160 and now you're 145, we probably wouldn't need to do a new race fueling plan. The other reason, another reason why you might get a race fueling plan outside of your body composition is that for whatever reason, you don't feel like it's working. It doesn't feel like it's serving you. If you're feeling, there may have been some other change. So if you're feeling like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right, or you have GI upset, sometimes I've actually redone race fueling plans when products have changed their ingredients. And then all of a sudden somebody is like, I don't understand. I used to be able to use these. Now I'm not. And, we compare and we're like, okay, they changed an ingredient. So that makes sense. So we might want to redo your race fueling plan. That might not necessarily include redoing your entire sweat test. Body composition, I would recommend doing that.
All right, great. So if everyone, thank you so much. And this is really helpful. And it is being recorded. It will be up on YouTube within the next day or so. If you have questions, then and some email is right there. And you're welcome, of course, to use the discount code if you would like to do a nutrition plan, a race fueling plan with us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Anne.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.